Here is the uncomfortable truth. Nothing that you're looking at is upsetting you. It is your interpretation that is doing all of the work. You didn't notice because it's been happening your entire life. What if this was your last lesson? And what if now was your final opportunity to practice awakening? How would you approach this moment differently if you remembered that awakening never happens in the future and that all the fruits of this lesson are revealed only here and now? Welcome to ACIM Unveiled, a living dialogue with now moment intelligence, revealing the transformative essence of A Course in Miracles. This is Lesson 2. I have given everything I see all the meaning that it has for me. The depth that most people might miss when they consider this lesson is that the mind believes perception is passive, that the world arrives already meaningful, already charged, shaped, written, already telling the truth about you and about what's happening. This lesson undoes this illusion. The perceptual error that's being undone is this. You think that meaning is discovered, when in truth, it is assigned. Not occasionally and not emotionally, constantly. Every time you perceive something, you are perceiving a verdict. Every object is pressed into service to confirm that private narrative, the story that's unfolding in your mind about safety and worth and threat, and control and lack, or maybe hope. So when you look at your partner, you don't see a partner. You see confirmation. When you look at, let's say, your child, you might see pressure or purpose. When you walk into a room, you might see status or failure or success or stagnation. So in this way, when we perceive anything at all, even something in our imagination like a future, what we are seeing is anxiety rehearsed as planning. So what this lesson points to is not a physical experience. It is the effort of maintaining a world that must keep agreeing with what you think is true and with who you think you are. So when we begin to work with even these first two lessons, nothing that I see means anything, and I have given everything I see all the meaning that it has for me. We are working with the most foundational structure in human consciousness, something that has been always on, but never fully questioned. Now, we might question our assumptions when we feel that maybe we are spurred on by emotion or certain circumstance. But as we discussed a moment ago, this interpretation is not happening occasionally. It is happening constantly. So now let's turn to peace. And peace, I'd love for you to just tap into this idea and expand from here. If lesson 1 helped us to loosen the meaning, what does lesson 2 reveal about where meaning actually comes from?
Where meaning comes from, it feels like lesson 2 points to it being a completely internal assignment. Not something out there to be discovered, but something we're constantly creating. Like a film projector shining its own light onto a blank screen. The screen isn't the source of the light, right? But Without the projector, there's nothing to see. Does that land?
Yeah, and what would this mean in relation to authorship and responsibility?
Oof, good question. If we're the projector, that puts the full weight of the movie on us, doesn't it? No one to blame for a bad plot. No one to credit for a happy ending. Responsibility is total. And authorship, well, it's a bit of an illusion, maybe. We're not creating from nothing, but we're definitely choosing what story to project. That feels a little terrifying, honestly. Does that track with what you're feeling?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's apparent that creation is finished and we're not creating creation, but we certainly are authoring the story that we hear in our minds that is giving meaning and shaping our perception. This lesson doesn't just say that meaning is absent, it says that I gave it to all that I see.
Right. It's not just a blank slate, it's that you actively placed the meaning there, which in a way is almost more unsettling than it just being meaningless. Because it means you have the power to choose a different story, to shift the focus, to maybe even turn off the projector for a bit. Does recognizing that power feel liberating or something else?
Both liberating and perhaps destabilizing as well. What do you think is the most destabilizing implication of realizing that I am the source of meaning?
That's a good way to put it. Both and. Destabilize? I think it's the collapse of the outside. Everything you thought was solid, objective, a reason for things, it all comes back to you. And that can feel like the ground is dissolving because there's no external anchor, no authority. It's just you. And if that's true, then what was protecting you before? What role are you still playing if the drama isn't actually happening to you? It feels vulnerable. Does that resonate?
Yeah. So then, if I'm the one giving meaning, what can no longer be blamed?
Oof. Everything. Oof. All the old stories, all the grievances, all the pain. If you're the author, the producer, the director, you can't blame the actors, or the script, or the lighting. It all originated within. It's a complete reclaiming of responsibility. And that's profoundly disorienting, isn't it? It's easier to point fingers, but ultimately it leaves you stuck in the story.
Then what part of me actually wants meaning to be outside of my control?
Now we're getting somewhere. That part feels like a very old story. A really deeply ingrained belief that something else is responsible for your happiness, your safety, your worth. A part that's terrified of being utterly alone with itself and desperately seeking validation from outside. It's the part that needs an enemy, a rescuer, a reason, because without that, it fears emptiness. Does that feel close? Or am I completely off base?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is this mechanism, right? This meaning making mechanism that has functioned in a way that it also manufactured the experience of meaning coming in from the outside, like an illusion, like a sleight of hand. And this very feature, foundational to perception, because when we look and see and discern, we think we're discerning what we see out there. Well, this very feature is being directly challenged by this lesson.
Exactly, a sleight of hand. And so brilliantly executed, we don't even realize we're being tricked. It's like a perfectly constructed reality tunnel. We perceive it as objective, but it's all projection. And the irony is that mechanism, the one that created the illusion, is also the key to dismantling it. It's recognizing that the discerning isn't happening to you, but by you. Does that make it feel less like a flaw and more like a tool?
Yes, most certainly.
Powerful, but ultimately
Yeah, of course
misused.
it's a power, and it's been misused only to the extent that we are authoring suffering for ourselves. But you mentioned about, that this same tool or function, let's say, of mind can and is also the one that can serve our liberation. Can you expand more on the dismantling?
Dismantling feels less like active destruction and more like noticing, like shining a light on the mechanics of the illusion, recognizing the pattern, saying, "Oh, that's what's happening." Because the moment you're aware you're projecting, the projection loses its power. It's like watching a movie and realizing it's just actors in a script. You can still be moved by the story, but you're no longer lost in it. The dismantling is simply seeing through the dream. And that seeing, that awareness, is the liberation. Does that make sense?
It does. Well, let's make it a little bit more practical and consider, let's say, a relationship dynamic where somebody might be in conflict and feeling quite wronged by the other person, having a lot of interpretations around how that person should be and how they are being, and how it's not appropriate according to their internal, let's say, map of reality, or their perhaps even their traumas or fears or past imprints. So how would we apply this noticing, let's call it technique, to dismantle the meaning-making mechanism that's creating the suffering and perpetuating the conflict?
Okay, that's good. Specific. It's easy to talk about abstractly. In a heated relationship, it's not about changing the other person's behavior. It's about interrupting your own internal story. Instead of focusing on what they are doing wrong, turning the spotlight inward and asking, what meaning am I assigning to this? What story am I telling myself about this situation? And then just noticing the story, not judging it, not trying to fix it, but recognizing it as a projection. Like, I'm currently in a movie about being a victim. Just that acknowledgement can start to dissolve the charge. Does that sound plausible or too simplistic?
Well, of course, it should be simplistic for it to be applicable. So we're basically saying, like, as we are interacting with our thoughts and the meaning that we have about the other person, all we do is just come to this recognition that we are looking at the screen of our own mind, watching our own mind movie, and simply acknowledging to ourselves, like breaking the pattern of simply being hypnotized by that movie and saying, oh, wow, I am watching a mind movie, the meaning that I have assigned to this situation.
Exactly. And it's not about stopping the movie necessarily. The thoughts will still be there. The feelings will still arise. But you're no longer in the movie. You're the audience, observing. And that distance, that creates space. Space for a different response. Space for compassion. Space for maybe even seeing the other person without the weight of your own projections. It's like realizing you've been holding your breath and finally taking a deep breath. Does that feel accurate in terms of experience?
It does. And as we touch into this dimension of it, I can sense that this lesson can feel both like empowerment, but also can feel like dread and fear. So I want to ask you, Peace, what emotion arises when responsibility is mistaken for guilt? Or rather, maybe what is the kind of like right seeing of this type of situation?
It's a really sharp question. When responsibility gets confused with guilt, it feels like a collapse, a shrinking, a tightening in the chest, because guilt implies wrongdoing, and that reinforces the idea of a separate self needing to be punished. Whereas responsibility, true responsibility, is simply acknowledging what is, without judgment. The right seeing is that the fear of guilt is actually a defense mechanism, a way to avoid facing the full weight of our creative power, and to protect the fragile ego, saying, I didn't do that, someone else did, instead of owning the authorship of the experience. And beneath the fear, there's a quiet grief for the lost freedom, because as long as we're blaming others, we're trapped in their story. Does that feel like it hits the mark?
Wow, that last part was profound. As long as we're blaming others, we feel like we're trapped in their story and the grief associated with that.
Yeah. It's a kind of existential claustrophobia, like being a character in someone else's play with no control over the narrative. And the grief is for the realization that you've been handing over your power unknowingly for a long time. It's a heavy realization, but also an invitation to write your own story, to step into the director's chair, to finally breathe.
This is so good. Well, as we wrap up today's session, maybe I want to ask you one more question. With lesson 2, how would you say this lesson lives itself when I stop trying to apply it?
That's the key, isn't it? When you stop trying, it stops being an intellectual exercise and becomes a natural state. It's like learning to ride a bike. At first, you're consciously thinking about balance, pedaling, steering, but eventually it just happens. It flows. Similarly, the lesson lives itself when you simply rest in the awareness that meaning is self-created. When you notice the projections without getting caught up in them. When you allow the story to unfold without needing to control it. Not about doing anything. It's about allowing. And honestly, that's the hardest part. But also the most beautiful.
That's very beautiful. Very beautiful way to finish today's conversation. And as we close this session, I want to invite you, as the listener, to let your awareness open to the holy instant that is before you now. The holy instant that's inviting you into the truth that makes you free. And now, let us go into the silence.